What is the right strategy? What are the right solutions to put in place?
That this is the biggest change you've seen in your 18-year career at BCG?
We talk about this idea of 10, 20, 70. It's a wide range.
It is.
There are still companies that are, can you reinvent your offering? Yeah. Maybe your product and service is totally different.
Welcome to the new Lead with AI podcast. In this series, we speak to senior leaders responsible for rolling out AI in their organization, and we uncover deeply valuable insights into what success looks like. In today's episode, we speak to BCG X Global CTO Matt Kropp and hear about why 70% of AI's value comes from people, not technology, how to successfully implement AI, including the importance of employee engagement, co-designing solutions, and continuous education through peer sharing, how AI can drive business growth beyond cost-cutting, ultimately creating better jobs for more people, and why focusing on joy at work may be the key to unlocking AI's full potential, and what factors you should consider when choosing which AI platforms to select for your teams and building your own AI technology. It's a conversation jam-packed with insights, so let's dive in. Matt, thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me.
I know you work in BCG and then specifically in BCG X. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the company and what you're doing in the realm of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CTO for BCG X, and everybody's heard of BCG, the management consulting firm. You may not have heard of BCG X, a fairly new brand, but we have a AI build division, which is BCG X, which is 3,000 engineers and data scientists that are building AI solutions and Gen AI solutions as part of our work with clients. So I'm running the Gen AI topic and I'm heading up the whole engineering organization there within X.
That sounds like a lot of people, 3,000. So give us an idea of what those 3,000 people do.
It's sizable. BCG is 30,000, so it's actually only a fraction of the overall BCG company. So we are a development shop, but quite different from others. And so, you have your systems integrators out there like Accenture or Deloitte, et cetera. We don't really compete with them. Really what we're doing is building solutions that are tied to business strategy. So when we're working with clients, we'll have both the BCG consulting team paired with the BCG X development team. And we're focused on how do we get impact? So what is the right strategy? What are the right solutions to put in place? Our BCG X team is building those solutions, and then our BCG consulting team is helping our clients actually get value out of them. We may want to talk about that, but a lot of we talk about this idea of 10, 20, 70. When you build technology, 10% of the effort and 10% of the value comes from the algorithm. 20% of the effort and value comes from the software and the data and the connections into other systems. And 70% of the value and of the effort really is in driving change in the organization. And so that pairing, BCG plus BCG X is really that pairing of BCG X giving you the 10 and the 20, the algorithms and the software, and BCG giving you the 70, which is the right strategy and the right change efforts to actually get the technology to create value in the organization.
And that's something that maybe people intuitively don't really get, that this is not actually a technology issue. It's mostly a change issue because there's been technology for quite a while that can automate. Obviously, now things can be done at much broader scale and they can be done in a much faster and smarter way. The change part of it is the part that I think a lot of people are very interested in. So a lot of people that we speak to, a lot of people who are in the community, they see the opportunity in AI. Maybe they have some great ideas about how to implement AI. And then they're looking into their organization and they're realizing that it's going to take a lot more than just launch a software product to actually get people to embed AI in their day-to-day. So what are some of the principles that you're either practicing internally or also sharing with clients when it comes to AI in the workplace?
Totally agree with your framing. And, I'd say, AI is not new. We've had AI for, a decade at least, maybe more. We've called it different things. And it has consistently been as you described. So just implementing technology, just writing the code doesn't get you the impact. You actually have to get the change to happen in the organization to get impact out of it. This new wave, so generative AI is the latest evolution of AI, I would say is even more so. And the reason is because, if you think about a lot of the AI solutions that companies have been building in the past, were really narrow solutions tailored to a specific task. I need a model that predicts something, right? I need to predict the next best offer to show to a customer. I need to predict, what my demand is going to be. And so that's a very narrow application. Generative AI is a general purpose tool, and it affects how the humans work. It's something that empowers the humans. So even more than the past, you have to get the people that are working with the tools to work in a different way so that you get the value from it. So a lot of the things we're focusing on now, we're in this new evolution. Generative AI really has only been commercially available for about a year. Yes, it's been around for a few years before that, but really enterprises have only started being able to build solutions, starting early last year. And so we're very early in the learning curve. And so I've been out talking, I've spoken to over 200 companies in the past year, to CEOs and boards and executive teams. And most of last year, they were really just focused on learning. What is this technology? How do I use it? They were experimenting. So they were building POCs, chatbots to do various things in their organization, and not getting much or any actual value out of it. Now companies are moving to thinking about, how do I get value? How do I get impact? And so they're doing a couple of things I think that are really important. The first is really having a strategy, identifying where you can use the technology and what is the impact I'm trying to achieve. And we might want to talk about this, but that impact could be, I want cost savings, I want to reduce the amount of labor that's in a particular activity, or it might be, I want to increase the quality of people's work, or I want to drive revenue growth, or I want to change customer experience. There are all sorts of things that you might get out of this. But starting with the idea of what is the objective I'm trying to solve, rather than I'm going to build a chatbot and give it to my employees, is critical. So start with the objective. Then we think it's really important that you look at the end-to-end process that you're trying to affect. What are people doing? What is the work? If I'm in insurance and I'm doing underwriting, there's a whole set of steps that have to take place. I need to go get some documents. I need to read lots of reports. I need to do some research in some databases. And then finally, I get to making a decision, coming up with a price, or writing a policy, et cetera. What are all of those steps that are involved in that process? And then identifying where in those steps there is toil, a lot of human effort, a lot of human work that can be automated. Also, that may be low value, that's not very fulfilling, that people don't necessarily like to do. And identifying also, where is their joy? Where do people really get fulfillment from their work? Or where do you actually want humans to be involved, because they bring diversity of ideas, creativity, they manage risk, they have relationships, they build, customer experience. There are all sorts of reasons why you don't want to take people out of processes as well. And so thinking very holistically about how to redesign the end-to-end process with AI, and with AI working with the human, is how we think, we really need to be working in order to get not only, efficiency and productivity, but also better quality, and also, frankly, a better job for the humans that are involved in working on that process.
And so you're actually practicing the part that we've only been hearing in theory, which is that AI can take over the manual, repetitive part of your job, the part of your job that you probably don't really like all that much, so that you can focus on the stuff that you actually like. When you're going into companies, is that a message that resonates when you're saying, look, you got to look at the entire workflow, and you got to look at where are people just dreading to come in because they have to do data entry, or because they have to go through manual processes, or because they have to click on a bunch of buttons in an application? And where are people coming to work and really showing up for what they're uniquely good at and what they like doing? Is that something that resonates when you talk to companies? Obviously, when you talk to individuals, it resonates deeply. How does it go when you go into a company and say something like that?
No, it absolutely resonates, and I will
Mm,
say it's been interesting, especially when I'm talking to senior leaders and boards. Um, this was a question that everybody had.
mm,
They're very excited about the technology. The technology is incredibly powerful, and it's in some ways it's mind blowing what you can do with it. But they very quickly came to a question of what does this mean for my people? Maybe we have expectations that senior leaders are just care about efficiency, but they really care quite a lot about their employees and about engagement, about their employees actually being engaged and
yeah.
really bringing their all of their capabilities to work. And so there was a lot of anxiety about this idea of if I'm introducing this automation, am I creating an environment where actually I'm going to hurt employee engagement?
Yeah.
So they've been very receptive to this idea, and I bring up this idea of minimizing toil in people's
Toil,
work and maximizing joy
joy. Yeah.
as sort of the formula. And every time I talk about this, the executives' eyes light up, and it sort of clicks a switch that I can see how this is actually not a negative for my people,
Mm,
how this is actually
mm,
a net positive, while I still get to take advantage of this capability. We've done some research actually on this. It initially came out of COVID and work from home and hybrid work. So we have a think tank, the Bruce Henderson Institute, that did a bunch of research around engagement, employee engagement. So what is it that keeps people engaged? As you said, wanting to come to work. Bringing all of their capabilities to work. And there are a bunch of findings, but the part that I find most interesting for the AI and generative AI topic is when you do things that improve productivity,
hmm
basically doesn't affect employee engagement. Like
Yeah.
small 5%, 3% improvement in engagement. When you do things that improve joy at work, it has a big impact on engagement. And I always joke, maybe that's kind of obvious. Like if I make you happier at work, you're going to be happier at work. All of the discussions about AI have tended to be around productivity.
Correct.
And so essentially we're saying, hey, we're going to bring you tools that make you more productive. And what people hear is the robots are coming for my job. And I actually give an example of this working with a tech company that had implemented a chatbot to support their customer support reps. So their call center reps. And it was supposed to make them more productive. And they were very surprised that only 15% of their reps had adopted the tool. And they were, asking the question, why are my people not adopting the tool? And it's,
I
our
have a
answer is, well, it's
sense.
pretty obvious. They know exactly why you're implementing this tool. It's to reduce their jobs.
Yeah.
So we have to take this different frame, which is,
Mm,
there is a lot of work that is not value add. We find for typical jobs, up to 25% of people's work is just administrative tasks that they don't
mhm.
enjoy doing and that you can automate. And so we really have an opportunity to change the way that people work.
Yes, and I had a great episode with Debbie Lovick where we went very deep into that research, and it's just like made my day because I think it's really what this is all about, right? If we are going to intervene in the way that people work, let's optimize it for joy, not for being more productive. Of course, we want to be productive as well, but those two things come together quite nicely. So then, when at an executive level, you're kind of like telling the story, and their eyes brighten and their ears perk up that we can use AI to make people happier at work, and therefore they will stay with you longer and they'll enjoy their job more. How do you then get to that adoption level, right? Because it may sound all great in theory, and then like you said, you build a chatbot to support call center workers and 85% says no thanks, I'm not going to dig my own grave. So what are then some steps that you recommend those companies to take to actually go from that initial idea to people truly using it and feeling that it's actually benefiting them?
The key is co-designing the solution with the people that are
Mm.
going to be using it. And so maybe I'll give an example. One of the areas I think that's quite exciting and moving quickly because it's a bit more mature is software development.
Mm-hmm.
So generative AI tools can support coding in pretty profound ways. GitHub Copilot being one example product, but there are others out there. That happens to be the one that has the most market share at the moment. So we're doing a bunch of work with clients that are implementing GitHub Copilot and generative AI solutions in their software development lifecycle. And it's been quite interesting. So we're working with a bank that has rolled this out to several thousand of their engineers. And so we were talking to the engineers about it and trying to understand their maturity journey, their learning journey to using these tools. And what was interesting is, at the first place, they were very excited about the tools. They said, this is great. Most of them were able to come up with examples where they said, this can do things for me that I don't like to do. And so I love it. I hate writing unit tests, but it's really good at writing unit tests. I hate writing documentation. It's really good at writing documentation. But at the same time, most of them were not using the tool to its full potential. And so they had all sort of self-discovered, one part of their work that it was helping them with, and they were very enthusiastic about it, but they didn't they didn't see the other opportunities. My favorite example was one of the engineers was very passionate about it. He said, I love it. I use it for writing my unit tests, but I only write unit tests on Fridays. So Monday through Thursday, I turn the tool off so that it's not in my way. And then Friday, I turn it on and I use it for my unit tests. And then we asked the question, well, do you think that 4/5 of the time you might also be able to get some benefit in other things that you do? And so the key learning from this was, you have to first of all, you have to involve people so that they feel ownership of the process. You have to give them some basic education so that they understand how it works. And really, they understand how it can be part of their process. But then you have to do a lot around community engagement, peer sharing, nudges, reminders, getting people to really be in the habit, because we're not in the habit of using generative AI as part of our work. We need to get in the habit.
Yes.
And so a lot of this is both reminders, but then seeing what is my colleague doing and hearing from my colleagues. So what we did with this client, they set up a bunch of hackathons where they work on a specific problem, but they collaborate. And then we heard a lot coming out of the hackathons where, one of the engineers would have some technique that they had developed and the others would say, oh, that's great. That could work for me. And so they're sharing. They set up ambassadors, so super users who were on call, so to speak, for others so that they could share how they did things. So I think it really is going to be incumbent on organizations, not just to say, here's a tool, or not just to say, here's a tool and here's the onboarding training, but really have this continuous community of practice so that the people that are using the tools start to reinforce one another.
So you're really mapping out an entire journey, which actually starts way before the rollout, which is to say you're going to get people involved in designing maybe what tool gets used and then how that tool will be used. And then when it actually launches, you have a lot of touch points to make sure that, for example, the people who feel very comfortable with it and maybe who are most enthusiastic about it, that they share some inspiration on, oh, here's how you can also use it. And if you need any help, you can approach me. And hopefully companies will free up time for people to do that and make sure that those ambassadors can be reached. Do you deal with, in that process, do you deal with people that already have adopted their own tools? So we saw from the Microsoft research, the whole, BYO AI thing, people bringing their own AI tools to work. Do you now sometimes have to retrain, let people unlearn maybe other tools, or maybe in the case of a Copilot for GitHub, at least some people were probably already using that. So in that kind of discovery journey, do they do any surveys around what are you currently already using? What are you most open for? What kind of pain points would you like to solve most? What's that part of the journey look like?
So I think we're pretty early in this evolution. So I don't know that I would yet say that there are a bunch of bad habits that people need to unlearn, because I think they're still learning just the first set of habits. But I think there's something really interesting in what you're talking about, which is, we have typically had software that was, as I was saying earlier, that was purpose built, that does one thing.
Yeah.
And this is general purpose, ChatGPT Enterprise or Bing Chat or, Google Gemini or, choose your tool. It knows about everything.
Yes.
It is able to do a whole wide range of work if I know how to ask the right questions, if I know how to interact with it in the right way. And so, we will certainly have very purpose-built tools that incorporate Gen AI, and that'll be all of our software. First of all, is going to get Gen AI as part of it because every software company is busy
Yes.
building it into their tools. Enterprises will build purpose-built tools that bring Gen AI into different processes, but then you're going to have the ChatGPT Enterprise kinds of tools where your employees will figure out how to automate their own work. And I think this is actually probably the place that is going to have the biggest impact, but is also it's going to take the most time because we all have to learn how to work differently. So at BCG, we're going through this evolution right now. We were very early to roll out ChatGPT Enterprise to all of our employees. So all 30,000 employees have access. And we've been doing education. We've been doing, telling people how they can use it and what they shouldn't do with it. But really the value is coming from our individual consultants figuring out for themselves on the work that they are doing at the moment, how can I use this to help my work? And so there's sort of this, all of us humans are going through this joint, discovery process of figuring out how this changes the way that we work. And it's going to take some time for us. Frankly, the tools are evolving. We will learn how to use them more effectively. We will learn when we should use them versus when we shouldn't use them. That's got to be a big part of the motion that organizations go through as they bring these tools into their day-to-day work.
Yeah, it must be a very strange time for L&D teams, for example, who have always been used to, you can study something and then you can teach it to people, but there's no studying because you're releasing something that you also don't really know how it works and how it will work and what the use cases are. And I think what you said, Matt, about the way to roll it out, especially with those enterprise-wide main LLM tools, what we saw in the Moderna case study, which we saw in the Microsoft HR case study, which is that everyone has access, you get a bit of base education, and then you go figure out where it fits in your workflow the most and what parts of your job you can now automate and what toil that you can remove in your job. Because as Josh Bersin said a couple of months ago, frontline workers typically know the work better than management and typically know the work better than leadership. So in that process, in your company, have you adopted certain rituals or behaviors again to let people share those use cases so that, again, if someone discovers something which is really great in their own workflow, how does it extend to their team and then maybe department, geographies, because you're global as well? What are some practices you have in place to make that happen?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important, although we need to develop other techniques as well. But we are doing what we're calling discovery sprints. And so we have set up identified teams. So this is just project teams, client projects that we're working on, but specific teams where we have made sure that they understand how to use the tools, but we're really kind of following what they are doing and using them as the innovators. They're figuring out how to use these tools within their work, and then we're capturing that and surfacing that and then broadcasting that out to the overall company. So I think we're going to have to do a lot of things like that. Like my example with the software engineers where they're doing hackathons, this idea of the power users or the ambassadors.
Yeah.
It's going to be a whole host of those kinds of ways of both identifying, observing what people are doing, catching those new techniques essentially, and then broadcasting them back out to the overall company.
And then one other related question that I had, and you're okay to say I don't want to answer this question, but I'm very curious because it comes up a lot in the conversations I'm having, which is that companies you're 1 year ahead of them. So you've already decided to go with ChatGPT Enterprise, which I'm assuming 1 year ago, you must have almost like call up Sam Altman and say, I want this for my whole company, because it wasn't quite a ready-made proposition as it is now. Companies who are still looking into, maybe they're already on Microsoft, like most larger companies, like, should I go with Microsoft Copilot? Should I go with ChatGPT Enterprise? Are you in those kind of discussions where companies are trying to decide which one to use? And then, you cannot give any like particular advice, but like, what are some things that companies should be looking at as they're looking at what platforms to adopt?
Yeah, the platform selection question comes up all the time. And I would break it into a couple of parts. So there is the deployment of tools for your employees, So that's the ChatGPT Enterprise or Office 365 Copilot, or Google's Gemini as part of G Suite and so forth. I think that choice, I would make it based on, first of all, what productivity software are you already using? What is your stance? What is your InfoSec team's stance on, what tools they're going to allow? I think there's Office 365 Copilot has some advantages because of the tight integration with Office. I think what we're seeing right now is some companies are adopting both Office Copilot and ChatGPT Enterprise, and they're letting their users pick when to use which.
That's a nice monthly bill. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Presumably they will rationalize that. But then there's also the choice of what models are you using, what platforms are you using for development. And I think there's actually been, more of our client conversations are around that choice. And I would say that, it's of course, this is all evolving very fast, so it's changing. But the conversation so far has been first around what cloud are you on? Generally, companies have standardized on one of the three hyperscalers as their core cloud. And then, are you comfortable with the foundation or the frontier model available in that cloud? So, OpenAI for Azure, Anthropic as being the most advanced model on AWS, and then Gemini for GCP. Or do you want to be able to use multiple models? And then are you comfortable with the security posture of not just using the model that's within your hyperscaler? So that there's sort of this question of where does my data sit? Where is my InfoSec team comfortable in terms of my cloud posture? What are the models I want to use? And then what do I want to use those models for? And so do I need the latest frontier model? Do I need GPT-4 instruction following capability for everything, or do I have some needs where the requirements are less? I can use a cheaper model, or maybe even I have very high volume and I need to have low cost, and so I actually want to operate. Maybe I'm operating Llama 3 in my own cloud because I want to control both the costs and control the perimeter around the data. So those are the kinds of conversations that clients are having.
Where are most people? So you obviously speak to a breadth of clients and a lot of different companies, again, different geographies. Is there any consistency at, like, most companies are at this stage where, again, they're looking at custom development versus companies who are still looking at, what tool to even use? Where do you see companies? Like, what's the status? And maybe link to that, like, what are still some misconceptions out there as you're speaking to these companies? What are some misconceptions you're still seeing when it comes to Gen AI?
Yeah, it's a wide range.
It is. Okay.
There are still companies that are, taking a very cautious posture. In fact, I had a recent conversation where they had not yet allowed their people to use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And, we had the conversation that, you realize that your employees are using it. They're just using it at home on their own personal accounts. And so maybe you actually want to bring it into your enterprise so you have some control. So there's a range. I mean, there are companies that are still, very early, and that's more industry. If you're an industrial goods company, you're not feeling a lot of urgency to adopt this. If you're an insurance company, this feels very existential because your business is entirely text. Your business is contracts, and so the whole insurance industry has really leaned into this technology. I think because they see it as both creating competitive advantage, but also a big threat if they don't adopt. So I would say it's a range, but you end up with choices around how much do they deploy with their employees, so the general purpose tools. And then how much are they investing in building custom applications? And the leading companies are the ones that have really identified this as a key technology that they need to have as part of their organization. They're leaning in by defining what are the key areas that they want to focus on. So what are the big rocks or the big moonshots that they want to develop? How do they empower the whole organization to come up with ideas and give them tools so that they can, you can have smaller departments that are kind of coming up with their own automation, or even individuals, as we were talking about, figuring out how to innovate on their own process. And then they're putting in place the right platform in terms of data, the right platform in terms of technology partners and models, putting in place a center of excellence in the engineering functions so that they can support building out, these applications, and putting in place the right governance so that they're, picking the right bets, investing in the right places, tracking that they're actually getting impact from those investments, and making sure that they're building responsible AI into everything that they're doing, that they're not creating risks with the technology.
Taking all that into account, I can see why you said in a recent talk that this is the biggest change you've seen in your 18-year career at BCG. Yeah. It is a lot for companies, and this really goes to the DNA, to the fabric of the company. What kind of company are you? If you're thinking about in the insurance industry, for example, you're rethinking so much of your process, you're rethinking so much of your customer touch point, your internal work. So it sounds like it's very fundamental. I know we're getting to the end of the time. I guess I'm really interested in any takes from you personally. I know you represent also a company, but you're so deep into this AI game and you're talking to a lot of companies. And I think you're seeing that there's still so much opportunity for companies to actually be first and be ahead of others, unless maybe you're in insurance. Like, how are you looking at it now? Any contrarian views, just something you want to share on this topic?
Yeah, I think that the big thing that I would encourage all of your listeners to think about is not just to focus on cost. We came into this topic with this idea that this was going to be the robots coming for the jobs. This was going to be about reducing labor, taking out costs. That comes from a couple of things. It comes from the media and comes from, all of our stories about
nice headline.
What is AI. Exactly. The Matrix and Skynet and all that. It also came because, this technology emerged at a time when companies were very focused on cost. That is the topic that enterprises are focused on now. So we've come in with this mindset that says this is just about saving costs. And I think that misses probably the majority of the opportunity. For sure, there are places where you can automate. For sure, if you have, customer support and call centers, yes, you can automate a lot of that and you're going to save a lot of costs. And yes, it's going to reduce a bunch of jobs. But in most other places, and it's actually, we have the research to back this up, that 80% of jobs are only going to be augmented by AI, meaning 10 to 30% of the activities in those jobs can be automated, but the rest, you still need the human for. So it's really important not just to go looking for the cost savings, but you then end up saying, well, yes, I can, take 20% of this job out, but if I take 20% out of, 5 people's jobs, it doesn't mean I can remove a person. There's all the other things that they're doing.
Yeah.
But this technology can do things like massively speed up a process, like massively improve the quality of the output, like allow you to do things that you couldn't even get to before. Maybe just to give a quick example, if we go back to the insurance topic, we worked with a commercial insurer on underwriting. Underwriting is the core process in insurance. The initial thinking was, well, maybe if we automate underwriting, we can have fewer underwriters, and it's about cost savings. Ended up happening, though, is when we looked at the process, about 80% of the process was toil, was the underwriter having to read through hundreds of pages of documents, go do a bunch of research. And when we automated that, so when we had the AI, because Gen AI is really good at reading long documents and providing really good summaries, right?
Yeah.
So we automated the process of the summarization and really shrank the time down. And what that did is it let the underwriter, first of all, not go through the toil. It let them focus on what they were good at, which was coming up, identifying the risk and understanding how to price the policy and so forth. And it allowed them to write the policies in 3 hours instead of 3 or more days.
Wow.
And so what this does then, it means that you're the first bid that your customer gets. So the win rate goes up in sales. And prior to this, they were not able to write all 100% of the policies that were coming in because they didn't have enough capacity, and now they could. So the result was not fewer underwriters. We kept the same number of underwriters. The result was growth. They won more, a higher win rate on their proposals, and they wrote more policies. And I think we need to be thinking in this way. Yes, there's some cost savings, but how does this change? If you could take a huge amount of time out of a process, how do you work differently? How does that give you a competitive advantage? How does that change your offering? And even further, we didn't have this technology 2 years ago. Can you reinvent your offering?
Yeah.
Maybe your product and service is totally different.
Yeah.
Maybe the way you interact with your customers is totally different. And so those are the opportunities that it's not about cost savings. It's not about taking out work. It's not about robots coming for your job. It's about creating entirely new opportunities for companies.
Yeah, I would say that the company almost would want to hire more underwriters because now they have such a great advantage that they can get that quote out to customers sooner and win a lot more. Perfect practical note to end on. Thanks so much for being on, Matt. It was a great pleasure to have you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today as we heard about the transformative potential of AI in business from Matt Kropp, the Global Chief Technology Officer for BCG X. Here are the actionable key takeaways from the conversation. Number 1, successfully rolling out AI means focusing on joy. To roll out AI successfully, you need a couple of things according to Matt. 1, you need a strategy that answers where you can use the technology and what impact you're trying to achieve. You need to look at the end-to-end process that you're trying to affect. What is the work? And number 3, you need to identify where is the toil and automatable human effort in those steps, the work that people don't like to do. At the same time, you need to identify where the joy is and preserve that. Use AI to create better jobs for humans, which will boost the quality of the work, job satisfaction, and employee engagement and retention. Number 2, AI is a change effort. Matt shared that BCG talks about the idea of 10, 20, 70 when building technology. 10% of the effort and 10% of the value comes from the algorithm, 20% from the software, but 70% of the value and the effort comes from driving change in the organization. The true value of AI implementation doesn't lie in technology, but in organizational change. When implementing AI, allocate significant resources to change management and employee adoption strategies, not just technical development. Number 3, co-design and educate to get everyone on the AI train. In the example that Matt mentioned, only 15% of call workers voluntarily adopted a new AI solution. This makes sense because they knew the risk of being displaced. Among developers, some switched on the AI only 1 day per week because they didn't know what else it could do for them. Matt says that therefore the key is to co-design solutions with the people using them. Involve employees in the AI implementation, which will lead to better adoption and more effective solutions. Create also cross-functional teams that include end users when designing and implementing AI solutions to ensure that they meet real needs and are readily adopted. Then, ensure education about the technology's benefits. This is best done through community engagement like ambassadors who can support others, peer sharing through, for example, hackathons, and nudges that create the habit of using AI. And number 4, selecting your LLM starts with what productivity suite and cloud provider you already use. With continuous product upgrades across the major LLMs like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and Microsoft Copilot, choosing your company's LLM isn't easy. Matt advises separating the questions about which tool you'll get for your teams, like a ChatGPT, and what you need to build your own AI applications. For the employee tool question, consider what productivity software you're using and paying for. For example, Office Copilot 365 has a big advantage for companies using the Microsoft Suite for Work, as it can train on that data. For development, similarly, choose based on which cloud you're on and which LLM is best integrated with that cloud. And final point from Matt is not just to focus on costs. Yes, we've heard a lot about AI being a cost saver, but also consider the tremendous opportunity. As Matt says, 80% of jobs will be augmented by AI. For the rest, we still need humans. So, create a better job for them, even allowing them to do things they never could have done before. For example, in the insurance industry, underwriters can now be freed from doing a lot of data input work and write policies in 3 hours instead of 3 days, significantly increasing their win rate and their enjoyment. Can you use AI to reinvent your offering? If you like this episode, please subscribe and give this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot. To be the first one to get updates on new episodes, subscribe at flexos.work/AI.